My mom sold my dead dad's gifts, while I planned his funeral, so I took back the house and made her pay rent. About a month ago, I got word from my dad's relatives that his health had been declining. To make sure he received the best care possible, I decided to move in with him for a while. My parents had been divorced for years, so dad lived separately, and I stayed with mom. Sure, I had weekends and holiday visits with him, but it was never the same as having him around every day. I shared a deep bond with my dad and missed him even more after the split. I always felt like he understood me better than mom ever could, and he was always there when I needed him. So when I got the news about his health, I thought maybe the universe was giving me a chance to be there for him, the way he had always been there for me. But life had other plans. Just a week after my visit, disaster struck, and we lost him to a sudden heart attack. As dad's only child, I took it upon myself to handle all the funeral arrangements. The moment I received the news, I called my mom to let her know. After all, this was the father of her child. Surely she'd want to know he had passed. Her response? Silence. Dead silence. For a moment I thought the call had dropped or she hadn't heard me, so I repeated myself. She finally replied that she had heard me the first time and asked coldly what I wanted her to do about it. Shock doesn't even begin to describe what I felt. It was like a slap in the face. Stunned, I hung up. I understood that dad was her ex-husband, that she had moved on, remarried, and started fresh. But this wasn't about their failed marriage or lingering bitterness. This was about me losing my father. Couldn't she have shown even a shred of sympathy? A simple, "I'm sorry for your loss," would have been enough. At that moment I wanted to break down completely, but I didn't have the luxury. I had a funeral to plan, relatives to notify, and paperwork to take care of. While I was struggling to hold myself together, I got blindsided by some shocking news from back home. It began when my next-door neighbor called. Her daughter and I had grown up together, so I assumed she was reaching out to offer condolences after hearing the news. I couldn't have been more wrong. Instead, she asked why I hadn't told her or her daughter about my supposed plans to move out. Caught completely off guard, I told her I had no such plans. I explained that I fully intended to return home soon. That's when she dropped the bombshell. My mother had been telling the entire neighborhood that I had suddenly decided to move out. And under that pretense, she had been going through my room, cherry-picking my belongings to either sell or throw away. She wasn't just clearing clutter. She was discarding things that meant the world to me. My childhood treasures, my guitar, my collection of books, even the vintage record player Dad had gifted me on my 16th birthday. I quickly pieced it together. This impromptu clearance was to make room for her new family. That's right, my possessions were being tossed out so my stepdad's kids could have more space. I was furious and heartbroken. As soon as I hung up with my kind neighbor, I called Mom. Before she could even say hello, I lashed out at her, demanding to know how she could dare sell my things, the things that held the last tangible pieces of my dad. She sounded flustered, completely caught off guard, and kept repeating the same question. "How did you find out?" But I didn't let up. I wanted the truth. Eventually, she confessed, Greg and his kids needed space, and they deserved to make the house feel like theirs too. I was livid. This wasn't about refusing to share. I had no problem making room for Ethan and Mia, my step-siblings. In fact, I'd always had a decent bond with them, even if I couldn't stand Greg. I was more than willing to coexist, but to strip my room bare while I was away grieving my father? That wasn't compromise. That was betrayal. The idea that my belongings, my memories, had been tossed aside like junk made me sick. It felt like she was using Dad's death as a convenient excuse to erase me from her life entirely. I told her straight out, what she did was unforgivable. The least she could do was give me the money from the things she sold. That's when she delivered the final blow. When the guilt trip didn't work, she shrugged and admitted she'd already spent the money on gifts for Greg's kids. My childhood treasures, exchanged for someone else's brand new toys. And the worst part? She knew I was heading to college soon. I would have taken nearly everything with me, but instead, she robbed me of the only pieces I had left of my father. Out of sight, out of mind, and apparently out of the house too. But my mother was foolish if she thought I'd just roll over and accept it all. And fate wasn't on her side either, because during the funeral, my uncle and I had to sort through Dad's personal affairs. While going through his things, we stumbled upon something I never imagined: a will. I was stunned. Dad had always insisted he didn't believe in legal documents when it came to family. He used to say the law ruined relationships and that things should unfold naturally, not because some paperwork said so. I never thought he'd actually create a will, but there it was, tucked inside a safe deposit box at his bank, one I never even knew existed. Apparently, he'd set it up after the divorce to avoid any future conflict, leaving clear instructions with my uncle on how to handle things when the time came. What the will contained shocked me even more. Not only had Dad never signed the house over to Mom after the divorce, but he had left it solely to me, his only child. All this time, Mom had been living in a home she assumed was hers, completely unaware of the legal truth. Now with Dad gone, the house belonged to me. Initially, I had no plans to say anything. Despite everything, she was still my mother. I thought maybe we could talk it out, come to some kind of compromise. But after what she'd done, selling my things without telling me, that option was off the table. Thankfully, Uncle Joe had my back. He handled all the legal formalities while I spent the next few days getting everything else in order. I had long talks with him about the paperwork, made calls to real estate agents, and even started checking out apartment listings, not for me, but for Mom and her new family. Finally, once everything was squared away, I headed back to what was supposed to be my home, bracing myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. You should have seen my mom's face when I walked in with my uncle beside me. She was stunned. I think she assumed I'd come crawling back, begging her to let me stay. But that was never going to happen. Her first instinct was to get emotional, putting on the concerned mom act and asking why I'd brought a lawyer. She even threw in a dramatic comment about whether I was planning to sue her. Meanwhile, Greg, my stepdad, lounged in a chair with that smug expression, clearly confident that I had no legal ground to stand on. I asked Mom to sit down. I had something serious to talk about. I knew no one in that room was going to apologize, so I stayed calm and asked if she remembered the details of her divorce. She looked completely baffled, probably wondering where I was going with this. That's when I dropped the bombshell. Uncle Joe pulled out the property documents we'd found and laid them on the table. As Mom and Greg read through them, I watched the color drain from their faces. My uncle explained everything. To avoid legal battles during the divorce, Dad had chosen to move out, but he had never legally transferred the title. The house remained in his name, and now that he had passed, I was the sole heir. The room fell silent as the truth sank in. Suddenly, my mom snapped. She shouted that it was unfair, that she had been Dad's wife, that she had lived in that house for years, and that she deserved part of it. In her mind, it was rightfully hers too. Greg, who had been sitting there smugly moments earlier, looked visibly shaken. Panic replaced his arrogance as he jumped in, insisting they had nowhere else to go. He accused me of being cruel, of taking the house from them. My uncle, the calm one in the family, stepped in before it could spiral further. He tried to keep the peace, explaining gently but firmly that, legally, I was Dad's only child and the rightful owner of the house. This wasn't about evicting anyone, he said. It was about respecting legal rights and the fact that they had completely ignored mine when they rearranged the house and sold my belongings. He even offered a middle ground, maybe some compensation for what had been lost. But Mom wasn't interested. She didn't want fairness. She wanted control. She began accusing me of being heartless and ungrateful, saying I was punishing her for moving on with her life. She went on and on about how much she had sacrificed for me, and how, in her time of need, I was turning my back on her. It was manipulative, clearly meant to guilt-trip me into giving up my claim. And when that didn't work, she threatened to take it to court and sue me to get what's rightfully hers. Through it all, I just sat and watched. It was like a play, a dramatic performance built on years of repressed resentment and swallowed anger. All the times I had bitten my tongue just to keep the peace felt like they were finally amounting to something. I calmly told her she could go ahead and waste both our time and her money in court, but we all knew how it would end. I made it clear I wasn't trying to be cruel. I said I'd give them time to find a new place, but I firmly stated that the house was now mine, and sooner or later, they'd have to move out. I reminded her that after everything that had happened while I was away, it was time for her to move on too. But the drama wasn't over yet. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, my stepdad escalated. He stormed out of the room, and for a second I thought maybe he'd finally accepted reality. But I was wrong. About 20 minutes later he came charging back in, and this time he wasn't alone. He had brought Ethan and Mia with him. The kids looked confused and nervous, clearly not understanding what was going on. He pointed at them and said I wasn't just evicting him and my mom, I was also kicking out innocent children. Then he looked at me and asked, mockingly, if that's really what I wanted. For a moment I hesitated. That hit a nerve. If I forced these kids to leave the house they had started to see as home, then how was I any better than my mother? My uncle noticed the hesitation in my face and leaned in, warning me not to fall for their emotional games. He reminded me the best thing we could do now was find a fair solution for everyone. Eventually, we came to a decision. No one would be kicked out, at least not right away. The moment my mom and stepdad heard this, they relaxed. I could see it in their faces. They thought they'd won, that their emotional manipulation had paid off. Mom even moved like she was about to hug me, but I raised a hand to stop her. This wasn't over. I explained that if they wanted to stay, they'd have to pay rent, a fair market rate, determined by an independent appraiser, and we'd sign a formal agreement to make sure everything was handled properly. The shift in the room was immediate. Relief turned into outrage in seconds. Mom's expression snapped from grateful to furious. Stepdad looked like he was going to explode. Mom screamed that she wouldn't pay rent to live in her own house. I calmly reminded her that it wasn't her house anymore, and given that she had tried to sell my things and toss me out, I thought paying rent was more than fair. My uncle stepped in again, supporting the idea and saying it was a generous offer that would also let Ethan and Mia continue growing up in the same home. For a moment it seemed like reason might actually win. The kids nodded quietly, probably relieved they wouldn't have to move schools or leave their friends. But then my stepdad snapped. Out of nowhere, he shoved my uncle hard and started screaming at him, accusing him of manipulating me and calling him every name in the book. What followed was a blur. I rushed to help Uncle Joe up. Mom was screaming at Greg to calm down and trying to restrain him. Ethan and Mia looked terrified, backing away from their father's outburst. Things got really intense. My uncle stood up, pulled out his phone, and said he was calling 911. He warned Greg to think carefully about his next move. Assault was a serious offense, and there was a witness. For a moment it looked like my stepdad might lunge at Uncle Joe again, but my mom grabbed his arm, finally realizing just how out of control things had become. Eventually the cops arrived and took statements from everyone. Stepdad tried to act cool, going with the whole "it was just a misunderstanding" routine, but the officers weren't buying it. In the end, because Uncle Joe chose not to press charges, the cops gave Greg a stern warning and told him to leave the house and cool off for the night. As he walked out, he muttered that this wasn't over. After the dust settled, I laid down the law one final time. I told Mom and the kids they could stay, but Greg was no longer welcome. Rent would begin next month, non-negotiable. Mom tried to argue, but one glance at Uncle Joe was enough to silence her. Later I pulled Ethan and Mia aside. I apologized that they had been caught in the middle of all this. I promised them that, no matter what happened between the adults, they would always have a place to stay if they needed it. So now, here we are. The house is legally mine. Stepdad is out. Mom has been giving me the silent treatment, which, to be honest, is an improvement over all the screaming. My step-siblings are walking on eggshells, and I'm left sitting with this one big question. Did I do the right thing? I mean, legally, I know I'm in the clear, but morally, that's where I'm stuck. So Reddit, here's my question. Ada for kicking out my stepdad and charging my mom rent for a house that's legally mine, a house from which they tried to evict me. Did I go too far, or was I just standing up for myself? Hi everyone, I honestly don't even know where to begin. A lot has happened in the past few days, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all. First of all, I want to say thank you, truly, to everyone who read my original post, offered advice, or sent supportive messages. It's been such a relief knowing there are people out there who understand and care. Things around here have remained tense, to say the least. Mom has been alternating between two equally exhausting modes, either giving me the cold shoulder or laying into me with full-blown guilt trips. And I'm talking the whole, "after all I've done for you," and "I carried you for 9 months" kind of drama. It's been emotionally draining. As for Greg, he's been MIA ever since the cops told him to leave, and honestly, that's been a blessing in disguise. Now, on to some of the more positive developments. I had a long heart-to-heart with my uncle. I can't even put into words how grateful I am for everything he's done. He's truly been my anchor through all of this. I felt awful about him getting hurt during Greg's outburst, but you know what he said? That's what family is for. Just like that, brushing it off like it was no big deal. He didn't hold it against me for even a second, which somehow made me feel even worse. but also incredibly loved and supported. He, along with many of you, advised me to stay away from my stepdad for my own safety. So we've been documenting everything, from the initial confrontation to every interaction since, just in case things escalate again. We also met with a real estate agent to get a fair property valuation and determine an appropriate rental rate. I had no idea how much the house was actually worth or what fair market rent looked like in our area. It was a crash course in real estate I never expected, but I'm honestly glad I learned. Of course, Mom was not happy with the number. According to her, there was no way the house could be worth that much. That's when the agent stepped in and pointed out that the rent we proposed was actually below market value, especially considering the size and location of the property. We've also started the legal process of evicting my stepdad. Given his violent behavior, we have grounds to pursue an immediate eviction. Mom, of course, tried everything to stop it. She cried, pleaded, even tried to downplay the whole incident. But I stood firm. I made it clear his actions were unacceptable, and I wouldn't feel safe with him in the house. It was incredibly difficult to watch her break down like that, but I kept reminding myself of everything that had brought us to this point. Sometimes you really do have to be cruel to be kind, right? On a brighter note, my step-siblings have been spending more time with me lately, which has actually been kind of nice. What truly made me happiest was when Ethan and Mia showed me that they had saved one of my old watches, something my dad had gifted me. They'd also managed to keep a few other small things that my mom had been planning to sell. I think they're just as lost and confused in all this mess as I am, and we've found a bit of comfort in each other's company. I've made a point to be completely transparent with them about what's going on. They're old enough to understand, and I think they really appreciate being treated like adults. We've had long talks about everything. Their feelings about their dad's behavior, their fears about what's coming next, and even their guilt over what my mom did with my belongings. At the same time, I'm doing what I can to protect them from their father. Who knows what's going on in his head right now? I made it clear that if he tries to contact them or shows up at the house, they need to alert me or Mom immediately. I'm doing my best to make sure everything is sorted out properly before I leave for college. So that's where things stand now. The last few days have been overwhelming, but I finally feel like I'm starting to get some control back. There's still a long road ahead, legal work, possibly therapy for all of us, and the slow process of rebuilding trust. But for the first time since Dad passed, I feel like I'm moving forward. Thank you again, Reddit, for all the support. It's meant more than I can ever say. I'll update again if anything big happens, but for now, I'm just taking it one day at a time. Wish me luck. Hey everybody, I hope you're all doing well. I saw that many of you had questions, so I thought it might be helpful to answer some of them. To address a few of the most common ones, yes, I'm keeping detailed records of everything, including the stuff my mom tried to sell. I've also changed the locks on the house. The only people with keys now are me, my mom, and my step-siblings. For extra security, I'm also looking into installing cameras, just in case Greg tries anything. As for legal action against my mom for selling my things, we're looking into it. My uncle has been helping me explore my options. But for now, my main priority is stabilizing the living situation and making sure this house stays a safe space for everyone still living in it. This whole experience has been incredibly difficult, but I'm taking things one step at a time. Reading your comments made me reflect on the past, and I've realized there were red flags long before everything blew up. I figured it might be helpful to share some background that sheds light on how we got here. As some of you know, after my parents divorced, they agreed I would live with my mom while Dad visited periodically. That arrangement worked out fairly well until Greg entered the picture. Looking back, the problem started almost immediately after the wedding. The house, my home, began to feel unfamiliar. Greg, under the guise of casual conversation, would regularly bring up the idea of me moving out. He'd mention it at dinner like it was a completely normal thing for a teenager to do. I was only 17 at the time, so the idea of living alone was not only unrealistic, but deeply unsettling. He also used to probe into my relationship with Dad, subtly hinting that maybe I should go live with him instead. At the time I dismissed it, thinking Greg was just awkward or didn't know how to talk to me. But now I see it clearly. He was trying to push me out. He'd also question me constantly about money. Did I have savings? Was I financially ready for the future? I had a part-time job and was saving for college, but his questions didn't feel like concern. They felt like pressure to leave. Now I recognize all of it for what it really was: Manipulation. There were other incidents too. Mom and Greg would ask me to lend some of my things to Mia, Greg's daughter. At first I didn't mind. Mia was respectful and always returned my stuff in good condition. But then, it escalated. One day, my mom asked me to give my laptop, my recently purchased school essential laptop, to Ethan, Greg's son. And by give, she didn't mean lend it. She meant hand it over permanently. I politely refused and explained that all my study materials were on that laptop and that I needed it for school. Greg's reaction to my refusal was way over the top. You'd think I committed some kind of crime. He actually told Ethan and Mia to avoid me, like I was the villain in all of this. That moment really opened my eyes. It was clear just how little my feelings or belongings were respected in this new family dynamic. Despite all these red flags, I stayed. Part of it was practical. I was saving money for college, and moving out wasn't financially feasible. But another part of me was clinging to the hope that things would get better, that maybe Mom would remember I was her child too and finally treat me like it. It was a naive hope. I know that now. I've been working through all of this with my therapist, trying to unpack years of subtle and not-so-subtle rejection. It's been incredibly painful to face the fact that my own mother could treat me this way, choosing her new family over me again and again. And yet, weirdly enough, I'm almost grateful for how extreme things got. Because if they hadn't, I might have kept making excuses for their behavior, kept downplaying the damage it was doing to me. This experience, painful as it has been, forced me to face the truth and finally take control of my life. To everyone who commented, offered advice, or just shared some encouragement, thank you. You helped me more than you know. Hey everyone, I've got some major news. Things have taken an unexpected turn. Yesterday, I got a call from someone I never imagined I'd hear from. Greg's ex-wife, the mother of Ethan and Mia. In a small town like ours, news travels fast, and she had heard about everything that had gone down recently. She asked if we could meet and talk. Curious, I agreed, and we met for coffee. After a bit of small talk, she got straight to the point and dropped a bombshell I didn't see coming. She told me that for years, Greg had been avoiding his child support payments. He used the excuse that he was supporting our household with my mom to justify not paying what he legally owed her. That added an entirely new layer of complication to the already tangled situation. She explained that the payments were court-mandated, but Greg had manipulated things to make it seem like his financial contributions to our home counted towards supporting Ethan and Mia. In truth, he was dodging his legal obligations while making it look like he was doing his part. She also suspected that Greg had been so insistent on keeping Ethan and Mia living in our house because it allowed him to claim that he was supporting them directly, thereby reducing or eliminating what he owed in child support. It became painfully clear that Greg's obsession with controlling the living arrangements had very little to do with family and everything to do with money. He was prioritizing his own financial freedom over his children's well-being. Even worse, his ex-wife told me she hadn't seen her kids in years. Greg had been constantly moving them from place to place, making it nearly impossible for her to track them down or maintain contact. Then she asked if I'd be willing to testify in court, should it come to that. She needed someone to verify what the living conditions had been like and to speak to Greg's real level of involvement, or lack thereof, in supporting the kids. I agreed. It felt like the right thing to do. Ethan and Mia deserve real support and stability, not to be used as pawns in their father's financial schemes. So now, Greg isn't just facing eviction from the house due to the legal ownership issue, he could also be facing legal consequences for years of unpaid child support, and if he doesn't start paying what he owes, he could be looking at serious penalties, even jail time. This might explain why he suddenly vanished. Greg's ex-wife also said she wanted to reconnect with Ethan and Mia. I told her I'd absolutely help arrange that. I'm sure they'd love to see their mom again after all this time. I also told my mom about everything. At first, she was in total denial, insisting that Greg would never do something like that. But once I laid out all the details, she just sat there speechless. And while I haven't forgiven her for what she did to me, a small part of me felt bad for her in that moment. She was clearly blindsided and betrayed, just like I had been. That said, knowing my mom, it's hard for me to fully sympathize. She's no saint either, but I think we can all agree by now. The main villain in this story? Greg, my stepdad. No question, what she's paying for now is the fallout of the choices she made, just like the rest of us. We're all hoping that everything with Greg gets resolved soon so that we can finally move forward and get back to some kind of normal. I can't even begin to express how grateful I am to all of you. I truly don't think I could have made it through this without your support. Your advice, your encouragement, your presence, it all meant more than I can say. You gave me clarity when I was overwhelmed and strength when I felt like giving up. I'll definitely keep you updated if anything new happens. Until then, take care, and thank you, sincerely, for being there.